Well, if you didn't think the Minnesota Vikings were going all in on a quarterback in the 2024 NFL Draft, I think this move just solidified that. Welcome everybody to JG9 News, where we talk all things NFL all the time. I'm Jared Gare, and I representing the 904 from the 602, and today we've got a lot of stuff to talk about on JG9 News, so make sure that you are subscribed, hit the notification bell, because we're going to be posting a lot of videos in the next few hours. But we're going to start with this, a trade that went down earlier today between the Minnesota Vikings and the Houston Texans regarding draft picks in the 2024 NFL Draft. The Minnesota Vikings are getting Houston's first-round pick, 23 overall, and they're getting a 7th-round pick from the Texans, 232. In exchange, the Houston Texans are getting the Vikings' 2nd-round pick number 42. They're getting pick number 188, and the Texans are getting a 2nd-round pick in 2025. This gives the Vikings 2 first-round picks, gives them pick number 11 and pick number 23. Now, you might be asking, why on earth would he make a trade like this 40 days away from the NFL Draft? Why would you make a trade like this? You don't know who's going to be on the board at 23. Why would you do this? Why would you give a 2nd-round pick in 2025 if you don't even know who's going to be on the board by this point? Well, because they're not going to stay at 23. They're not staying at 23. This is purely a trade that is done to acquire assets, to move up in the draft, and get a quarterback. Obviously, the Minnesota Vikings badly need a quarterback. They lost Kirk Cousins in free agency to the Atlanta Falcons. They signed Sam Darnold as a bridge quarterback. More on that in just a bit, and why I really didn't like that signing. But Sam Darnold, a 1-year contract worth $10 million. He is a bridge quarterback, and the Minnesota Vikings desperately need to find their guy of the future, especially because in that division in particular, every other team has found that quarterback. Packers with Jordan Love, Lions with Jared Goff. The Bears will have that guy with Caleb Williams when they take him 1st overall, barring anything insane. The Vikings are only doing this trade to get a 2nd first-round pick so that they can trade up in the draft and get a quarterback. Now, we talked earlier about the Arizona Cardinals potentially being a trade target. Pretty Ricky, the insider that broke a lot of moves, including the Derrick Henry move to Baltimore, the Brian Burns trade to New York, the Calvin Ridley signing in Tennessee. He's broken a lot. He even broke Hollywood Brown to the Kansas City Chiefs. He said that the Vikings are putting together a package to try and move up to the number 4 pick and get that spot from the Arizona Cardinals. Well, maybe you might not have a lot to work with if you have pick number 11, and on top of that, you might not want to give your future first-round pick. But if you have 11 and 23, all of a sudden, this gets way more enticing, and the Cardinals could bite on this. Because the Cardinals, as it is, have pick number 4 and pick number 27, that pick from, oddly enough, the Houston Texans in that trade last year, where the Cardinals traded down, Texans traded up, and got Will Anderson, the defensive rookie of the year. I think they're pretty happy with that trade if you are Houston. This is a very deep wide receiver class, according to many people. Yes, you have the guys at the top, like Neighbors, like Marvin Harrison Jr., obviously, and Rome. But you have 6 to 8 wide receivers in most mock drafts projected to go in the 1st round. Every mock draft I've looked at, it's no fewer than 5, and it's about 8 wide receivers on average, 7 wide receivers on average. There's a lot of receivers out there. The Arizona Cardinals desperately need wide receivers. Yes, a guy like Marvin Harrison Jr. would help a lot, and they would have every opportunity to get him because we know the top 3 picks in the draft with Washington, with Chicago, and New England, not in that order, but are going to be quarterbacks. The Cardinals need receivers. They have Wilson, they have Dortch, and that's it. No one else on the team has a shot at making the roster, or a good shot at least, at making the roster barring injuries, especially because they lost Rondale Moore in that trade with the Atlanta Falcons, which I thought was a phenomenal trade for Arizona, simply because Moore had 1 year left on his contract. Ritter has 2 years left on his contract, solidifies the backup quarterback position because Clayton Tune was god-awful, and he's pretty cheap compared to what a lot of these backup quarterbacks are making. But you don't have Rondale Moore anymore. You don't have Hollywood Brown anymore. You gave a 1st-round pick to get him. Didn't really work out the way you thought it would. And now he is with the Kansas City Chiefs signing that 1-year deal in KC. Now, if you have pick number 11 from the Vikings, 23 from the Vikings, and 27, you can take 2 wide receivers in this class where a lot of people expect 6 to 8 receivers to go. So there's 1st-round talent to be had. You can fill that void. And on top of that, you can still draft someone in the 1st round at a different position. Maybe a pass rusher, maybe someone in the secondary. Who knows? You have options. You're not necessarily tied to taking a receiver with all your picks in round 1. So this move would make a lot of sense for the Cardinals to potentially be a trade partner with the Vikings. The Vikings have to give up a lot to do this, and this is a good start getting pick number 23 from the Houston Texans, because it looks like the two teams trying to trade up to leapfrog the New York Giants at pick 6 to get J.J. McCarthy, the Michigan quarterback, are the Minnesota Vikings and the Denver Broncos. Both those teams have pretty comparable first-round picks. The Vikings and Broncos have back-to-back picks as things stand in the 2024 NFL Draft in the first round. So it's about who can offer the best package to trade up to that number 4 spot or the number 5 spot. I don't think the Chargers would bite. I don't think they're a great trade partner because obviously they need a ton of help at wide receiver. They might take Marvin Harrison Jr. or Rome. I don't think they're going to be trading back. I don't think they're missing out on a blue-chip prospect at wide receiver when you just lost Keenan Allen to the Chicago Bears and you lost Mike Williams in a cap cut. But Arizona Cardinals, we've talked about that before. It's about the best trade package, and the Minnesota Vikings have a lot to offer. And on top of that, this move makes a lot of sense for Minnesota, giving up that second-round pick in 2025. It's not a huge deal because the Vikings are in line for an extra compensatory pick in 2025 by losing Kirk Cousins. As it stands, the Vikings lost more free agents than they gained that factor into the compensatory pick formula. So as things stand, the Vikings are in line for an extra third-round pick. Now, it's why I criticized the Sam Darnold signing, because they could have been in line for 2 additional third-round picks, and they're probably not going to get those. If they didn't sign Darnold, they would have 2 compensatory picks in round 3 in 2025 because of Danielle Hunter getting picked up by the Houston Texans. Having said that, they still get 1 compensatory pick in the third round. So in terms of how many day 2 picks they'll have for 2025, in all likelihood, nothing changes. Think of this as the Vikings are just trading down 50 spots on day 2 in the 2025 NFL Draft. Now, I will say this for Minnesota. If they make this trade, you give up 11 and you give up 23 to get a quarterback, you might be in a bit of a pickle. Obviously, you do whatever it takes to get your franchise quarterback. If you believe J.J. McCarthy is your guy, you do it. But the Vikings don't have a second-round pick. They gave it to the Houston Texans. And they don't have a third-round pick because they gave that to the Detroit Lions a few years ago in the trade for tight end T.J. Hawkinson, which was a great trade for Minnesota. But you might only have 1 pick on the first 2 days to work with, barring any trade-ups and whatnot. So there's a lot of holes on the team that the Vikings have to address, and they'll only have 1 pick on the first 2 days of the draft to do this if they do trade up to that number 4 spot using 11 and 23 as ammo. But obviously the Vikings, they don't know who's going to be on the board at 23. They're not going to stay at 23. The whole point of a trade like this is to get ammunition and to build up your treasure chest and treasure trove of draft picks to move up into the top 5 and get the franchise quarterback that we all thought Minnesota was going to be getting. It looks like those rumors about the Vikings and Cardinals working on a trade, they're getting more and more enticing. And this move with the Houston Texans that they just made to get an extra first-round pick, get some more ammunition that way. It just adds some fuel to the fire, to say the least. But what are your thoughts on this trade? Do you like the move for the Vikings? Do you like the move for the Texans? Do you think the Vikings are going to use those picks to trade up into the top 5 and get a quarterback like J.J. McCarthy? Do you think it will be enough? Do you think that this pick makes sense for the Vikings to do? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments down below. Busy day today in the NFL. So be sure to subscribe to JG9 News so you don't miss a moment of the action. And that's going to do it for this episode of JG9 News. And as a reminder, check my main channel, JaguarGary9, where we talk all things NFL history all the time. Until next time, this is JaguarGary9 signing off. And as always, go Jags.